A very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers. Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk. We are delighted to be with you, whether you are viewing via Second Advent Radio or whether you're listening via Second Advent Radio or you're viewing via SLC Church Channel or SLC Adventist. We welcome you just the same. It's a delight to be with you. We are continuing our discourse on diabetes this afternoon. Last time we were here, 2 weeks ago, we had a very engaging discussion on diabetes, and we did not quite finish. So we have decided to seek to bring that discussion to a conclusion. Well, I perhaps should not say to a conclusion, because so long as we continue to have the issue with diabetes, the discussion needs to go on.
Yeah.
But for our purposes, we are going to be relating to certain concepts. We want to share certain bits of information with you that we believe will aid you greatly in this journey towards a diabetes-free you. You may not be diabetic, but chances are you know somebody who is diabetic. But before we get into that discussion, we'd like to invite you to have a word of prayer with us, shall we? Eternal Father and our God, be with us as we go into this afternoon's discussion. We thank you for the opportunity and privilege to share with our viewership and our listeners on Second Advent Radio. We pray that you will guide the discussion, be with our guests today, and grant that the information presented will prove meaningful. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have two guests with us this afternoon. Last time we had the discussion, we had three guests. We have two guests because we just want to zero in on some preventative measures this afternoon. So we have with us, we had a who is absent this afternoon? Let me begin by that. We had, forgetting his name now, but
Andy Truitt,
who shared with us the personal experience perspective, which was very meaningful. But today since you just saw her face, let me introduce to you again somebody who is really no stranger to Let's Talk, Dr. Monica Osborne-Stevens. She is the managing director and owner of Moss Medical. She is the medical advisor to the Diabetes Association here in Antigua, Barbuda, and she does a whole lot of other things. She is a diabetes specialist. We are delighted to have you with us this afternoon, Dr. Stevens. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Pastor Greene. Good afternoon, Ms. James. And to the rest of our listening and viewing audience, another time back on Let's Talk. It's always a pleasure to share.
We also have with us a new guest this time. Last time we had Charity Dublin. She unfortunately can't be with us this afternoon. She, I understand, is on itinerary someplace in the world where the time is very different. But we have with us the president of the Diabetes Association this afternoon. And in the person of Miss Juanita James, I want to welcome you, Miss James, to Let's Talk. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Pastor Greene. Good afternoon, Dr. Stevens, and a pleasant good afternoon to listeners and viewers. It's my pleasure to be here. I've followed some of these discussions in the past, and I'm pleased to be able to join you today.
We are delighted to have you with us. I didn't give you a proper introduction, so let me let our viewers know that you are a retired nutritionist. You have a master's in food nutrition. You are a graduate of the University of the West Indies, and now retired, but president of the Antigua and Barbuda Diabetes Association. So you will prove to be a very good substitute for Miss Charity Dublin, who we had at the last time, but cannot be here this afternoon. We're delighted to have you. I was with you on the march last week. You're retired, but you still have a lot of energy. I see you marching, walking through the streets of St. John's. You must be practicing all the principles of good nutrition why you are so active. But it's a delight to have you with us today. Yes. Well, we want to begin by asking Dr. Stevens to provide a brief summary of some of the things we spoke about the last time. We want to be able to bridge the gap. We always have new viewers, new listeners, individuals who may have missed the last program. We mentioned that diabetes is a growing concern for us in the Caribbean especially, but in the Western world in general. And in Antigua and Barbuda, we said, Dr. Stevens, that there's a prevalence of 13%, 1 in every 8. But what else did we say about diabetes? What is diabetes? Just give us a brief recap of some of the things we shared last time.
Okay, sure, Pastor Greene. So first of all, what is diabetes? Diabetes is a chronic disease that occurs because the body has a problem with regulating the glucose. So no matter what type it is, it could be type 1, type 2, or even gestational diabetes, the problem is the blood glucose is not being regulated. So where the blood glucose should be, it is not there. So let me provide an example so we could understand this a little bit more clearly. Pastor Greene, let's say you just had your veggie burger with of course wheat bread for lunch. The carbohydrates that's in the bread, that's going to break down into your glucose in the body, and that is the body's main source of energy. However, the glucose is just going to be in the bloodstream sitting there unless there's a signal to the pancreas. And that's what normally happens. When the body recognizes that there is an increase in the glucose level, the pancreas, specifically the beta cells of the pancreas, secretes insulin. And insulin's job is to take the glucose and put it inside the cells. So insulin acts like the key to unlock that door so that glucose could go inside the cells. So it provides the body with the energy, and the cells can get to perform their processes and the different functions, okay? So when that does not happen, the glucose stay inside of the bloodstream, and that's how complications start. So there are 3 main types of diabetes. Type 1 diabetes account for about 5 to 10% of the global prevalence of diabetes. So it's the least common. However, it's considered an autoimmune in its cause. What is postulated is that for some unknown reason, the body attacks the beta cells of the pancreas. And when that happens, insulin is not produced. And once insulin is not produced, the glucose cannot get into the cells. And so that patient will now need exogenous insulin. So they have to take daily insulin in order to survive. And that's type 1. Type 2, two factors occur in order for the individual to have type 2 diabetes. Number 1, the pancreas still does secrete some insulin, but it's not at the amount that the body would require. So that's number 1. And number 2, the body developed resistance to the insulin. So the cells are now, the insulin acts like the key trying to unlock that cell, but it's not unlocking. Sometimes they may get a few unlocks, so you get some of the glucose in, but the majority will still stay outside because of the resistance. And this is the majority of the global prevalence. 90 to 95% of the persons with diabetes have type 2. And type 2 is predominantly a lifestyle factor issue, okay? And
so let me interrupt you a little bit, Dr. Stevens.
Yes.
So we are saying that there's type 1 and that there's type 2. And you're saying that type 2 is more related to lifestyle, which means that my behavior can determine whether or not I get it.
That's correct.
Am I correct? Yes.
That's
okay,
correct.
Wonderful. Yes.
So when we're talking about risk factors, you know, we talk about the non-modifiable and the modifiable. The ones that we can modify contribute greatly, which are lifestyle factors. They contribute greatly to the development of type 2. And then we have gestational diabetes. With gestational diabetes, that's diabetes that occurs when a woman is pregnant. What happens is that when the fetus is growing, you need the placenta. So once the fetus is developing, some hormones are released from the placenta. And unfortunately, those hormones, especially one you call human placental lactogen, HPL, that causes a lot of the cells in the body to become resistant to insulin. Now, normally, after the infant is delivered, the resistance decreases, and so the female's body can go back to normal and she's better able to regulate the glucose. However, she would now be at an increased risk of developing type 2 later on. So those are the three main types of diabetes, Pastor Greene.
All right, so we have type 1, we have type 2. When we talk about, just to be clear again, Dr. Stevens, just want to clarify something there. So when we say that we have a prevalence in Antigua Barbuda, for example, of 13% or 1 in every 8, we're mainly talking about type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
We're talking about type 1 and type 2. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, wonderful. Now, I want to ask you a follow-up question. How is a person diagnosed? How do I know that I have diabetes?
Okay, very good question, Pastor Greene. And there are 4 tests that we can do. And Pastor Greene, I think you have a slide that we can show our viewers.
Okay, so you want me to share?
With diagnosis.
Okay, no problem. Sorry. Is this what you want me to share?
I'm seeing prevalence of diabetes of the global statistics. That's
Yes.
prevalence. Continue. Oh, yes, Pastor, we needed to talk about that. So before we go on to the diagnosis, I want us to look at this prevalence because this is important. Diabetes is now considered one of the fastest growing NCD. And the burden, the global burden is so great because of the complications. And if you take a look at the slide where diabetes burden arising, we can see that we have North America and the Caribbean, which we are part of, currently have 13% overall. And this was in 2019. But they are estimating by the time 2045 comes around, we're going to be at a 15%. But think of it, if Antigua is already at a 30%, what's going to happen in 2045 if we don't reduce the prevalence? Look at places like Europe and Africa and the Western Pacific and even the Middle East. When we compare those larger areas, we're doing pretty bad. Look at Africa. That's much larger than North America and the Caribbean. We have 3.9%, right? They are 3.9%, and they in 2045 they only estimated to increase to 4.4, which is a 0.5%. Are you following, Pastor Greene?
I'm more than following. In fact, I have a couple of questions I want to ask you on this because
look at Europe. Europe is currently at 8.9, and by 2045, it's estimated that there'll be about a 10.3%, right? So we're not looking good in the Caribbean. We're really not looking good. So we have a lot of work to do. Look at the Western Pacific. I'm sure you can recall islands in the Western Pacific. I can't at the moment. However, they're currently at 9.6%, expected to rise for about 2.2%, which will give them about 11.8% in 2045. And we know these estimates, the majority of the time, they're even more when it comes to these non-NCDs. By the time the year comes around, they're usually more than estimated. They're hardly ever underestimated.
You know, this slide presenting these global statistics, you did say that this is 2019 and the projected for 2045. And in North America and the Caribbean, we have 13.9 in 2019. We know that Antigua is already there with a 1.7 projected increase. So if we are looking at 15 or higher, what I'm looking at though is that this rate seems to be among the highest in the world.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
Every other place currently is below 13.3%. Below 13% actually. So it really says that there is something that we have to consider with the North America, Caribbean issue there with respect to diabetes. That seems to be a serious concern.
Oh, definitely. And Pastor, if we look at our eating habits and the amount of exercise that we do, we would understand why we are in the position we're in right now.
But you wanted me to show another slide.
Yes, we're going to do the diagnosis now. You asked the question, how is it diagnosed? How is diabetes diagnosed? Correct. And there are 4 main tests that you can do when we talk about diabetes diagnosis. We can do the fasting blood glucose, or we call it the FBS, fasting blood glucose. And this test is taken when you have fasted for about 8 hours, but no greater than 12 hours. And when we're talking about fasting, we're talking about 0-calorie intake during that time period. And you go to the lab, they take the blood test, and if we are above 126, I'm going to show you a slide afterwards, but if you're above 126, you will be considered to have diabetes. But we also need to repeat this test a second time for confirmation. And then we could do what you call the OGTT, the oral glucose tolerance test. You go to the lab fasting, they take a blood sample, then you are given a really sweet liquid to drink at 75 milligrams of a liquid. It's very sweet. And then 2 hours later, 1 and 2 hours later, you have your blood drawn again and it is tested. Then you have, the next one we have is a random blood glucose. Random blood glucose, it means that you just see the person or tell the person to come to the lab, whether they have eaten or not eaten, you just take the blood glucose levels. And if that random blood glucose is about 200, and the patient also complains of symptoms such as frequent urination, frequent thirst, fatigue, and such like, then they'll be considered to have diabetes. And then we also, the final one, which is my favorite, and it's the cornerstone of diabetes diagnosis and management, is the HbA1c. HbA1c really gives the average of your blood glucose over 2 to 3 months. So I used to have patients before they coming in, and I know their blood glucose were really high the past couple visits, but they come in and it's really low, and I'm excited for them. I'm congratulating them. Then I said, okay, let's do your HbA1c. And then the HbA1c would come out high, because we know prior to their visit, they could always drink a lot of water, watch what they eat, but that blood test that they would do in office would not give me the average of how the blood glucose have been prior to them visiting me at the office. So the HbA1c is really good for diagnosis and also for management of diabetes. And if you turn to the next slide, we could actually see the figures. So these are the figures I really want our audience to look at. So when it comes to the HbA1c, or sometimes it's just shortened as A1c, the value you're looking for is 4 to 5.6%. It comes to the percentage form. So I'm a very big advocate for knowing your numbers. So without you feeling sick, you could just talk to your doctor, go and have these blood tests done. Most of the labs will just do them for you, right? So the HbA1c, it should be between 4 to 5.6. If you have pre-diabetes, you'll be 5.7 to 6.4. And if you are full-blown diabetes type 2, it'll be 6.5% or greater. Now, if you do the fasting one, your blood glucose level should be less than 100. If you're pre-diabetic, 100 to 125 and over 126, as we said earlier, you'll be considered to be having diabetes. The OGTT, 140, that would be normal. 141 to 199, prediabetes, and anything over 200 plus, in addition to having those symptoms, is considered to be having diabetes. And I think we're forgetting one is your random blood glucose, also over 200 with symptoms.
Now, another question here, Dr. Stevens.
Sure.
What you're effectively saying is you need to get tested.
Definitely. You need to know. If you don't know, you can't do anything about it. And it's sad when we have adults come and they say, haven't seen the doctor in the last 5 years, the last 4 years, 2 years. And we do have facilities around. If you are financially challenged, there are people who can help you. There are clinics that you can go to and have these blood tests done. I write forms for people to have their blood tests done, even without them coming to see me. That's okay. I want you to know your status. All right.
So,
I want you to know your status.
Just a general medical question. Because I think this is important for the general public. Everybody should, and you can categorize it if you so desire in terms of age, you know. But when I say everybody, generally speaking, we should have something called an annual medical. Is that true or false?
That is true.
So that an individual should never say, I've not been to the doctor for the last 5 years.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, of course, we're gonna get to Ms. James in a while, but just to establish here that it is important for us to do what is considered to be an annual medical, because I could be good this year and next year I could check and something is not.
That is correct. That is correct, Pastor Greene. And most of the times you hear people say, well, nothing is wrong with me. I feel fine. And I say to them, you will feel fine now, but you want to check to make sure that everything is in the normal ranges, because everything starts from being fine, then it goes to mild, and sometimes it's not until it's severe, then you start getting symptoms. So we want to check before that happens.
Okay, now you did mention symptoms. We're going to come back to that in a while, but I kind of want to, well, let me go ahead and ask you, and then we will talk to Miss James. But so what are some of the symptoms? And maybe you want me to share again.
Okay, share that slide so I could explain them faster, if you have that one with the symptoms. Yes. Okay, so those are the main symptoms. And when you have symptoms, of course, a lot of these symptoms could signify other issues that's going on, right? But most of the times when a patient comes, for example, and they're complaining of excessive thirst, which we call polydipsia, or excessive urination, which we call polyuria, the first thing you want to think about is diabetes. So what happened with excessive thirst, remember we said that sometimes there's a lot of glucose in the bloodstream, and what happens, the kidney is trying to get rid of that glucose, and so water will follow. And once you're losing water, you're going to become thirsty. So that's why they get the symptoms of excessive thirst. Then you have excessive hunger, unexplained weight loss. Why unexplained weight loss? Because the body's main source of energy is glucose. And if the glucose is not going inside of the cells, the body is going to break down fat and protein, and that's how you're going to get the weight loss. Then you have the blurry vision, you could have a non-healing ulcer, fatigue, yeast infection, and we mentioned the frequent urination. So these are the main symptoms you have persons complain about.
Can I just ask you, because there are some folks who may be viewing on their phones or listening on the radio and do not have the benefit of the screen, or if they're on their cell phones may not be able to see. So could you just go through the symptoms again for the benefit of those who can't quite see the screen?
Okay, so you have excessive thirst, you have excessive hunger, unexplained weight loss. You might say, Doc, I'm not exercising. I think I'm eating well. I haven't changed my portions, but I'm still losing weight. You also have blurry vision, slow healing of wounds or ulcers you may have, fatigue. Doc, I slept almost 10 hours last night, but I woke up feeling really, really tired. Women usually complain of vaginal yeast infection. Men could have this as well, and also frequent urination. Pastor, I didn't mean men would have vaginal yeast infection. Men could have yeast infection around around the glans penis.
Okay, all right. I wanted to, well, let me just mention this. I do understand that sometimes when symptoms are presented, a person may have one of the lots and may conclude this is diabetes. But is it not true that sometimes any one of these taken by itself could be caused by something else and not diabetes?
That's correct. And this is why I urge people, whatever that is happening to your body that is not normal, have it checked out. Have it checked out. You don't have to be scared and say, oh, I might have diabetes. Just have it checked out because it can be something else. Frequent urination, for example, you often have that when you have a urinary tract infection. Okay, so you could just be urinating a lot and you're worried, oh, I have diabetes, but it really could just be a urinary tract infection. So whatever that's happening in your body that is abnormal, you need to have it checked out.
Okay, wonderful. Now I want to come to Miss James, particularly because we want to focus on not just presenting the information, but how can I improve the situation or avoid getting diabetes? Now, today we want to give attention to management or prevention, right? And that's why I want to bring in the nutritionist here. How do I eat, Miss James? How do I eat to manage my blood sugar? The doctor said that one of the real challenges with diabetes is the ability of the body to handle sugar in glucose. Of course, we know that insulin is important in this regard, and so some people have to spend their lives taking insulin. But how do I eat to manage my glucose levels, Miss James?
I think health eating when someone is diagnosed with diabetes has always been a challenge. And I think it's becoming more and more of a challenge considering our eating environment. And although we focus on managing blood sugar levels, we know it goes beyond the blood sugar levels. So I
Miss
want to
James,
share.
can I interrupt you a little bit? Your head is kind of cutting off, so if we can, okay, yes, we can see you now. Yes.
Yes, I was saying that it is one of the very challenging areas of prevention and management of diabetes and other NCDs, what people eat. But we focus on blood sugars because, especially at diagnosis, that is the problem. That is the main problem. Blood sugar levels are out of control. They're too high. But we know that there are other factors, there are other issues that we must also address through nutrition. And if you would share with us a slide showing, why nutrition is important.
Okay, let me do that for you.
It's number 12.
Okay, so here we are, yes.
Okay, so we can see that the second bullet point here speaks about improved glycemic control. Dr. Stevens spoke about the A1C. So that's a measure of how well persons are controlling their blood sugar levels, in addition to people who monitor on a daily basis. But beyond blood sugar control, of course, there are other factors such as other health-related issues that may present with diabetes, such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol. So we are concerned as well to be able to manage blood pressure. We are concerned about promoting healthy weights and decreasing the risk of the onset or the progression of any diabetes-related comorbidities like heart disease, like chronic kidney disease, and of course, having a good quality of life. We also want persons to be confident about how they make their food choices and how comfortable they are eating in social settings, and not always just thinking, I have to eat this way because I'm living with diabetes. But to address specifically, what can we do to control blood sugar levels? We want to start with selecting a variety of foods from the different food groups. So we want to have foods that are sources of energy or carbohydrate foods come in here. You also want to have foods that are important for, we look at the food group chart and you can see you have your starchy foods. You want also to have some fruits and vegetables, dried peas and beans, lentils, some sources of protein, either from animal sources or from plant sources, such as your peas and beans. And you will see that very small amounts of sugar and sweeteners as shown in this. These should be minimized, and same with fats and oils. Now, specifically to address the control of keeping blood sugar levels as close to normal as possible, we want to focus on the carbohydrate foods.
Ms. James, can I interrupt you a little bit?
Yes, sure.
Because you're saying that based on what I'm seeing on the screen here, the food-based dietary guidelines. I see it says Antigua and Barbuda beside it, but I'm assuming that this is standard. That's my assumption. I don't know if I'm correct. So my question is, I heard you saying that you should have very little sweets. We should watch carbohydrates. We should be careful to ensure that we have fruits. My question is, some foods are sweet. Is there a challenge getting sweets, eating sweet foods? I mean, fruits that are sweet.
The challenge comes with the quantities and the frequency with which they're used. So for instance, a good example would be, we know during mango season, it becomes a real challenge. Now, it's not that mangoes are bad. They have natural sugar in them, which is a source of energy, but they must be eaten in controlled portions and also balanced with what else is being eaten. So this is a general food-based dietary guidelines for the population. There will be some adjustments for persons living with diabetes. Okay. And one of the areas we will focus on would be the carbohydrate foods, the starchy foods, because these are the foods that will greatly impact the blood sugar levels compared to foods from other food groups. So you want to choose what we refer to as complex carbohydrate versus more refined foods. So whole foods, whole grains, ground provisions, if you're having rice and peas, or brown rice, whole wheat pasta, if you're having pasta, etc. As opposed to more refined foods, like the white foods, the white rice, the white bread. So you make a greater selection of foods that are higher in fiber. They take a longer time to break down, and therefore they don't spike the blood sugar as quickly.
So let me ask you a question on this. I'm interrupting every now and then because I want to be sure that our viewers are following. But you just mentioned that we want to get complex carbohydrates and avoid refined foods. Avoid, for example, white rice versus brown rice. Avoid white bread versus wheat bread. What I hear people say all the time is, oh, I can't eat whole wheat bread because it doesn't taste nice. I can't eat brown rice because it doesn't taste nice. And then there is the conclusion, therefore, that if I want to eat healthy, I have to eat foods that are not tasting nice. Can you comment on that? Is it that the food is not tasting nice, or is it that our taste buds have grown accustomed to something that is not good, or something else?
Okay, so let me step back a little. And it's not never that you're going to eat white bread or white rice. but your preferred choice would be more complex carbohydrates. All right. So you don't want to always be eating white bread. You may not always eat whole wheat bread, but also you should not always be eating white bread. That should not be the preferred selection. Right. And the goal is not to take the joy out of eating. We want to focus, of course, on healthier choices, but we still want to know that you can enjoy your meals and have a good quality life. So it may be a gradual change and including foods that you're not accustomed to having. For instance, I know in a conversation recently with a colleague nutritionist, she said, I would just be glad to see that there's some vegetables on the plate. You know, we promote eating plenty of vegetables, but you may be starting off with someone who was not including vegetables at all in the meals. And if you can get them to select one or two vegetables and at least have them starting maybe with the main meal and then extending to other meals of the day, having it more often on a daily basis compared to only on a Sunday or Monday. So even small steps to improve where you're starting from if you have not started out in a good place. So the idea is not to make healthy eating take the joy out of eating, but we have to consider that if we want to maintain good health, and this is why I say I start by talking about variety, because even if a person is living with diabetes, you still want to have good health. You still want to have adequate amount of all the nutrients to maintain that good health.
Now
So the focus cannot just be on, am I controlling my blood sugar? It's your overall health and well-being that we really need to address. And that can be done in a family setting so that everybody is eating healthy and following similar eating patterns in the household with the necessary adjustments for the person living with diabetes.
I mean, you're making a very valid point there. But I just wanted to go back to you are a registered dietitian. You taught food and nutrition in secondary school. So you have a master's in public health from the University of West Indies. You know, therefore, a lot about how to make food taste good. The people who say, listen, I can't eat this and I can't eat that because it doesn't taste good. I want to go back to that question again. Can we, and then you mentioned that we don't want to take the joy out of eating. So can I have joy in my eating while at the same time I'm eating healthy? In other words, there are some people who believe that to have joy in their eating, it has to be some sugary snacks or something, some refined food. Can I have joy in my eating while at the same time eating healthy?
Yes, I do believe it is possible. But we have to work with people where they're starting out from and make the necessary steps towards a goal. And once the individual has decided, look, I want to improve my health, how can I do that? So maybe, as I said, maybe they used to drink sodas on a daily basis and it's hard for them to give up sodas, right? And you're saying, okay, we want to make water the drink of choice, but it's real hard and they'll have sodas at least once or twice in the week. We're not saying go ahead and have your sodas, but every step towards improving should be encouraged and supported until you can get to that place of having healthier eating patterns, making healthier food choices. So it all depends where people are starting from. And as nutritionists, as dietitians, as health workers, we need to acknowledge where people are and negotiate what changes they're capable of making, not just about health alone, but there are socioeconomic factors, there are lifestyle factors. You know, who is preparing the meals? Is somebody preparing my meals and therefore I don't have a lot of control about what is being offered to me? Am I in the habit of eating out a lot? And if I'm eating out, what are the options there? Do I need to maybe think of other places I could eat? Or what are the choices are on the menu if I'm eating out? So I think working with individuals, working with families, assessing where they're starting from, and encouraging even small steps. I think that's really quite important.
All right, wonderful. I think you wanted me to,
setting goals.
I believe you wanted me to share this slide as well, so you can comment on it one time.
Okay, so I mentioned about variety, selecting foods from the various food groups, and you can see here we have a source of protein, preferably lean protein, so fish, or if you're having poultry, you remove excess fat and the skin, etc., or you have peas and beans and nuts as substitute, fruits, vegetables, some starchy foods. You know, variety is key. That's how you're going to get balance, and that's how you're going to get all the adequate amounts of all the nutrients that you need for maintaining good health. Then we know that fruits, vegetables are not as popular as some other food groups. So we put emphasis on the consumption of non-starchy vegetables. Just today, corn was being named again as a vegetable of choice. And we know corn is really a sweeter vegetable. It does also have starch in it. So we're talking about things like spinach, salad vegetables, eggplant, squashes, carrots, tomatoes, etc. Having more of that in your meals. Minimizing, it's very difficult for most people to absolutely cut out every bit of sugar. It is so pervasive in the food that we have around us. But certainly the obvious one, like sweetened drinks, sodas, sweets, chocolates, candy, you know, donuts and the like, really should be minimized. And when they can be avoided, they should be avoided, because these tend to spike the blood sugar levels a lot faster. And if they're also had in excess, they can contribute to weight gain, excessive weight gain. Then we look at foods that are whole foods. And you can see here, you can see the difference if you're having ground provisions, if you're having fish or chicken or beans or fruits, compared to if, let's take something like beef. If people are eating beef, if they choose to eat that, compared to something like corned beef, which is highly processed, higher in salt, higher in fat, you know, and other fillers may be in there. If you're having ground provisions as opposed to something like chips or fries. So choosing whole foods over more processed foods, and also even the way we prepare foods, are you adding excessive amount of salt or sugar or fats to food? So this can form a foundation of a healthy eating pattern, and not just for people who are trying to prevent diabetes, people living with diabetes, and indeed for the whole family.
Very instructive indeed. Really do appreciate that. My next question, I don't know which one of you will want to respond to it, but I do want to ask. It is a concern for me. In many instances, the development of diabetes begins from childhood habits. I'm thinking, maybe I should not make that statement. I'm thinking that childhood habits can lead to. What should parents of young babies or children, school-age children, need to know? What do they need to know, I should ask, about diets and how it affects their children? And is it true that your childhood habits can increase your risk for diabetes later in life?
Well, I can respond to that. So nutrition, we address through a life course. So we start with a healthy mother, healthy pregnancy, and a healthy baby. Recommendations here: exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life is preferred. That's the recommendation. And continuing to breastfeed up to 2 years and beyond if mom and baby are comfortable with that. To establish good patterns of growth and development. And every parent wants to see that child growing well, developing well. We do growth monitoring in our child health clinics up to age 5 Unfortunately, there's a gap after that. And this is why it becomes so important for those annual medical checks, so that parents can know that each child is growing, adequately, developing as they should, meeting their milestones, etc., for growth and development. So I think parents are aware that they're very good about taking the children to child health clinics and doing the growth monitoring. And as I say, up to age 5, we really also want to capture them after age 5 and not wait until they become adults, right? That's important. Nutrition is important as well for building strong immune system, fighting infections. Children go to preschools, they come back with a cold very often, school reopens, coughs and colds. So we want to build strong immune systems that will help them to fight these infections. And it is so important to establish good eating patterns early in life. If children don't learn to eat vegetables, drink water, eat a variety of foods in childhood, it's much harder to get them to accept those foods and to accept good eating patterns later in life. And we do see the change when children leave the preschool into the primary school setting, into a secondary school setting, and ultimately maybe into the workplace, right, as adults. So we want to establish good patterns from early in life that hopefully will set a foundation for what will become more easy to practice in adult life.
There's a comment in the chat that now the person says wheat bread. I'm assuming they mean whole wheat bread, because bread is wheat for the most part. The average, a typical bread, I know we do have other kinds of bread, but the typical bread is wheat. But most people, when they say wheat bread, I think they're talking about whole wheat bread. And they're saying that it burns some people's stomach. So as a nutritionist, is there an alternative?
So if you have an intolerance to a particular food, that is an individual issue, and then you would find an alternative to that. Mind you, you can have other sources of fiber. So if it's not coming from your whole wheat, it's not coming from whole wheat bread, certainly it can come from other sources such as ground provisions, peas and beans, nuts, fruits, vegetables, etc. And I just want to also say that the fact that you have chosen whole wheat bread over white bread doesn't mean you're having less starch. So there's still importance for food portion control, right? So if you choose to have whole wheat bread, especially if you're living with diabetes, because you have chosen whole wheat bread doesn't say that you should have 6 slices versus 3 slices, because there is still starch in that bread.
So everybody needs to understand how they should eat, in terms of portions. If I'm having breakfast, should I eat a whole loaf of bread versus 2 slices of bread, and how big is my slice, that kind of thing. You're saying that we should give attention to those kinds of matters, because I suspect, if I go back to my own childhood, I don't know that there was a time when we were told, hey, this is what enough means. Some of us grew up in poverty, so we were always happy to get some extras now and then. But people should make an effort to get educated in terms of food portions. Is that what I hear you saying?
So it's to meet your individual needs. How active are you? What's your age? What's your sex? What other health issues are you dealing with? All these will help to determine what is best for that individual. For persons living with diabetes, I just want to say too that if you are making changes in your diet, if you are trying to modify the way you used to eat, we have an advantage now that people can do self-monitoring of their blood glucose levels. So if you have adjusted your meals, you can always test your blood sugar level to see how is that impacting my blood sugar. Am I getting better control? Am I still having a challenge? Is my blood sugar dropping too low or still remaining too high? So that's a tool, that's a very useful tool that is now available to the majority of persons living with diabetes in Antigua and Barbuda, that can help also to guide persons and to build their confidence that they are making, better choices, and how is it affecting their overall health Am I putting on too much weight? Am I maintaining weight? Am I losing weight? Depending on what the goals are and what the targets are.
Now, it always seems that time runs by so quickly. I just looked up at the clock and realized that we only have about 5 more minutes, but we're gonna make the best of it. I do have a concern. So let's talk about weight. Again, I don't know who will respond to this. The level of overweight and obese children is alarmingly high. Oh, Dr. Stevens, maybe I should ask you, what's the relationship between weight and diabetes, and how best do I manage my weight while remaining healthy? Dr. Stevens, I think you are muted.
I'm so sorry. There's still some controversy when it comes to weight in terms of the BMI, but that is still internationally used. And it is best to know what your BMI is, right? Your weight based on your height. If you are overweight, we're talking about BMI 30. Well, obese is 30 and above. So normal BMI is 25, up to 25, 18 to 25, that's normal BMI. Then 25 to 30 is overweight, over 30 is obese, and then you have 35 to 40, that's morbidly obese. Once we start increasing in fat, the fat cells secrete different chemicals, which increases the resistance of the cell to insulin. So the more fat your body have, the more resistant the cells are going to be for insulin. So that's the main factor when it comes to type 1 diabetes. Obesity increases insulin resistance. And that's how the type 2 diabetes come into play. And this is why we're seeing a lot more of our pediatric children being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. You see.
Okay, so because you did say type 1 just now, so I want to be sure
type
that
2,
it's
sorry, type 2.
Okay.
Remember, type 1 is autoimmune.
Yes.
Right? So we're talking about type 2. Once you see even a child, young teenager, middle-aged, mid-teens, you were thinking type 1 diabetes. But now we're having 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds who have type 2 diabetes, and not just even in Antigua, but throughout the Caribbean.
Okay, so here's my thing, because you said BMI, body mass index.
That's correct.
So guide the person at home as to how they can check that, because it's one thing to say your body mass index should be between what you said, 14 and 25, was it that?
18 to 25.
18 to 25.
We use a calculator, so we all have our smartphones, right? So just go to Google and put in calculate my BMI, and you're gonna get a calculator that comes up. So, Pastor, you want me to calculate your BMI? Tell me what your BMI, you have to know your height and your weight. So, Pastor, let's do that example. I have it right here. What is your height?
I think my BMI is 21.
What is your I'm asking what is your height and your weight?
No, but I'm giving you the answer. So
when last have you checked that?
Not very long ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Miss James.
But hold on, Dr. Stevens, because I really do want, I mean, yeah, we're having fun, it's good, but I do want to be sure. So what do people have to do? So if I'm 150 pounds.
So you know your height, you need weight.
I am 5'6" of what does that say?
So I just had it, Pastor, that I was going to plug in that for you, because we have charts that you can look at as well, but I don't have a chart with me. So you need to plug it in. So you need to know your height and your weight. So say that again. Your height is what, Pastor? Give me an example of a height you're thinking.
No, I'm not giving him my height. I'm just making up something.
Someone, anything.
Yeah. So an individual is 5'6".
Okay, 5'6", and what's
And
the
they
weight?
weigh 150 pounds.
150 pounds. So that person's BMI would be normal. That's 24.2. Okay, and that's a normal BMI. 18 to 25 is normal BMI.
All right. So when it goes beyond the
Beyond 25,
25, a person should begin to get
that's
concerned.
very good. That's overweight. Between 25 and 30 is considered overweight. And over 30 is obese. And then you have class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4 obesity. So you're right. By the time your BMI is, well, by the time you see it's coming up to 24, you have to start watching yourself. So this is why we do have regular screenings for persons to find out what their numbers are. Because if I realize, which I have personally, realized that my BMI was creeping up, and once it got a little over 25, I was really nervous about it, very uncomfortable about it. So I start to work more on it. But if you're not checking, you can easily reach up to 27, 30, and that is going to be harder to bring back down because you have a lot more work to do to get back into that normal range of 18 to 25.
Okay, wonderful. I didn't miss a part of what you said, but that's fine. I did have a little power issue, but good information. And I was asking specifically because I want to be sure that people do understand. Now, we were discussing, our time is up, we're going to wrap it up here, but we were discussing the matter of weight in children. And I see some children, I mean, I don't go around and ask people, what's your height and what's your weight, and then try to calculate. But sometimes you can just see, just the observation can tell you, hey, something is wrong with that child. That child is too heavy. I sometimes hear people saying of their children, oh, let the child alone. The child is young, they have to eat plenty. So I did ask, and I'm not sure I got an answer to the question. When children are obese, and some even morbidly obese, does that have implications for their health as adults?
Of course, yes. But I answered the question, Pat. Oh, I'm sorry, maybe I didn't. But once you start adding that fat would lead to other NCDs, one of which is diabetes. Once you get into your adult age, remember, as Miss James said, once you start practicing unhealthy lifestyle, if you have unhealthy lifestyle practices as a child, it's very easy to take that into adulthood. It's very difficult to change. And that is why Miss James was suggesting it's important not to introduce certain foods to your children, because once weights start adding on, you will hear people say, oh, when they become teenagers, they're going to shed that off. But sometimes that is not so. And when they become preteens and mid-teens, they're battling with the weight, and then they start having self-esteem issues. They're starting being bullied at school, etc. So we don't want to start the weight in childhood because you may take it into adulthood.
We are out of time. We have to wrap up here, but I have to ask this question because Dr. Stevens, you mentioned in your presentation earlier, pre-diabetes. What is pre-diabetes and what are the implications?
Okay, so quickly, so pre-diabetes is when you notice the blood glucose is rising, but it has not gotten to the diabetes level as yet. So if we're talking about the fasting blood glucose, we're talking between 100 and 125, okay? And when we see that there's pre-diabetes, if you don't do changes, studies suggest in 2 to 5 years, you will have full-blown diabetes. But I have seen persons who have had pre-diabetes, and within a year, they have developed full-blown diabetes.
Okay, very well. Thank you so much. Ms. James, it was a real pleasure having you with us. I'm going to give you the opportunity to leave a final thought with the folks out there. What is it that you want them to remember? I mean, everything you said is important, very important. We had more questions to ask. We We could have shared more, but we have limited time. So as we close today's program, and by the way, for those of you who are on, remember next week next week is the 30th. Yes, it is. Is it? Yes, it is. We are going to be talking about issues relating to seniors, palliative care. We did promise to do that back in October, but we didn't have the time. But we have a very special individual to talk to us about palliative care next week. So all those of you who have seniors, those of you who are getting old, you know, that there's sometimes when you have individuals who get to that point where, hey, you know, it's time to take them to the hospice. We want to discuss those issues next week. But now let's wrap up here because we do have to go. So I'm going to give each of you just 30 seconds to leave a final thought with our viewers and listeners.
I'll go first so I can be short. Lifestyle changes are very important if we are to win the fight or even begin to make any headway with non-communicable diseases. So we need to really focus on our lifestyle habits, our eating, our exercise, managing our stress, etc. It will go a very long way in preventing diseases, not just diabetes, but high blood pressure, cancers, irregular hormone, etc. So lifestyle changes is the way to go.
Thank you so much. Ms. James?
And if I could just add that it can be challenging to make those changes, but there is support. We do have dietitians in the hospital, in the community, in private and public sector. And I would encourage persons, especially if they have been recently diagnosed with diabetes or another NCD, to have a consultation. You know, learn as much as you can so that you can really make those choices that will lead to better health outcomes, even if you have a diagnosis of a chronic disease.
Thank you both so much. Really appreciate the information. And the good thing is it's on YouTube. So individuals who didn't get an opportunity, those of you who are listening and have friends who need to get this information, you can always ask them to go back on YouTube and just search for Let's Talk Diabetes Awareness. It will come up there, or Let's Talk with Dr. Greene, and you can select it. We really appreciate you, and we hope one of these days you will be back for something else, diabetes. May God bless you.
God bless you.